Most people don't realize this until it's too late. You bring home a beautiful aloe vera plant, thick leaves, healthy green color, full of promise. You place it somewhere bright, maybe even right in the sun because that feels right. Then you water it. And you keep watering it. You check on it constantly, adjusting, fixing, trying to do everything right. And slowly, quietly, your aloe begins to die. The leaves lose their firmness. They droop, stretch, or turn pale. Maybe the tips start browning. Maybe the base gets soft. And the most frustrating part is this. The more you try to help it, the worse it seems to get. Here's the truth that changes everything. Aloe vera is not a plant that thrives on attention. It survives in spite of it. And the moment you understand that, everything shifts. You've probably been told that caring for plants means consistency. Regular watering, plenty of sunlight, frequent feeding. That advice works for many plants, but aloe plays by a completely different set of rules. It comes from harsh, dry environments where survival depends on storing water, not constantly receiving it. So when you treat it like a typical houseplant, you accidentally create the exact conditions it cannot handle. This is where most people go wrong. They assume more care equals better results, but with aloe, more care often means faster decline. Imagine this. Instead of constantly checking your plant, adjusting every little detail, and worrying about whether you're doing enough, you flip the entire approach. You step back, you simplify, you let the plant do what it was designed to do. That's when things start to change. Because the real secret isn't about adding more effort. It's about removing the unnecessary things that are hurting your plant in the first place. And once you see it happen, once your aloe starts to recover, pushing out thicker leaves, standing upright, turning that deep, healthy green again, you realize something surprising. This plant was never difficult. It was just misunderstood. Over the next few minutes, you're going to discover exactly what's been holding your aloe back. Not complicated tricks, not expensive tools, just simple shifts that make a massive difference. Small changes that turn a struggling plant into one that practically takes care of itself. And by the time you're done, you'll know how to grow aloe that doesn't just survive, but thrives with less effort than you ever thought possible. Because sometimes the best thing you can do for your plant is stop trying so hard. Let's start with the one mistake that silently destroys more aloe plants than anything else. Light. But not in the way you think. You've probably heard that aloe loves sunlight, so naturally you place it in the brightest spot you can find, maybe right against a window where the sun hits hardest. It feels logical. More sun should mean more growth, stronger leaves, a healthier plant. But what actually happens is very different. Instead of thriving, your aloe begins to show stress. The edges turn brown or red, the leaves look dry, almost scorched. In some cases, they even start to curl inward as if trying to escape the light. And it's confusing because you're doing exactly what you thought was right. Here's what's really going on. Aloe does love light, but it doesn't love harsh, direct exposure for long periods, especially indoors. Glass windows can intensify sunlight, turning it into something much stronger than what the plant would experience in nature. It's like placing your aloe under a constant spotlight with no break. The result is slow damage that builds over time. What aloe actually prefers is bright, indirect light, a place where it gets plenty of brightness without being blasted by intense rays all day. Think of a spot a few feet away from a window, or near a window that gets gentle morning light instead of harsh afternoon sun. When you move your plant into this kind of environment, something subtle but powerful begins to happen. The color stabilizes, the leaves stop stressing, new growth starts to look fuller and more balanced. The plant isn't fighting anymore. It's settling into a rhythm that matches its natural design. And here's something even more important. Aloe is incredibly adaptable. If your home doesn't get perfect natural light, it can still thrive. A simple artificial grow light can provide everything it needs without the risk of sun damage. In fact, many healthy indoor aloes grow entirely under controlled lighting conditions. There's also a small habit that makes a surprisingly big difference: rotation. If your aloe leans toward the light, stretching unevenly, you can gently rotate the pot every couple of weeks. Just a slight turn. This keeps the growth balanced and prevents that lopsided, leggy look that many people struggle with. What you begin to notice is that aloe doesn't need extremes. It doesn't want the brightest, hottest spot in your home. It wants consistency, gentle, steady light that allows it to grow without stress. And once you get this right, you remove one of the biggest hidden obstacles standing between your plant and real, visible growth. The kind of growth that makes people stop and ask how you did it. Now we need to talk about the mistake that kills aloe faster than anything else, and it's the one almost everyone makes, especially in the beginning: watering. It feels natural to water your plant often. You see dry soil, and your instinct says it needs a drink. You want to be consistent. They need air as much as they need water. When the soil stays wet, the roots can't breathe, and eventually they begin to rot. And here's the tricky part: the damage happens below the surface first. By the time the leaves start looking weak or mushy, the root system is already struggling, so the entire strategy needs to change. Instead of watering on a schedule, you switch to a cycle: soak, then dry. When you water, you do it thoroughly. Let the water run through the soil until it drains out from the bottom. No light sips, no surface watering. A deep, complete soak. Then you wait. And this is where most people fail, because waiting feels wrong. But this is exactly what aloe needs. You let the soil dry out completely, not just the top layer, the entire pot. Bone dry. That could take 2 weeks, sometimes 3. In cooler months, even longer. There's a simple way to check. Push your finger into the soil, a couple of inches down. If there's any moisture at all, you don't water, you walk away. And the moment you start doing this, something interesting happens. Your plant stops declining. The leaves become firmer, the color deepens, the structure improves. Because now the roots are finally in an environment they can survive in. Aloe stores water inside its leaves. That's why they're thick and fleshy. It's built to handle drought. It expects periods of dryness. When you constantly water it, you're working against its entire survival system. So, if you remember only one thing from this entire video, let it be this: when in doubt, don't water. It feels like doing less. But in reality, it's exactly what your aloe has been waiting for. Now imagine you've fixed your watering, you've moved your plant into better light, but something still isn't quite right. The leaves aren't as strong as they should be, growth feels slow, and no matter how careful you are, the plant just isn't thriving the way you expected. This is where another hidden problem comes in: soil. Most people never question it. They buy a plant and it comes in soil, so they assume it must be fine. Or they repot it using standard potting mix, thinking all soil works the same way. But for aloe, soil is everything. Regular potting soil holds too much water. It stays damp longer than aloe can tolerate. And even if you fix your watering habits, the wrong soil can still trap moisture around the roots, creating the same problem in a slower, less obvious way. So what does aloe actually need? It needs soil that drains fast, soil that allows water to pass through quickly instead of holding onto it. Think of it like this: when you water your aloe, the goal is not to keep the soil wet. The goal is to hydrate the plant and then return the roots to a dry, breathable environment as soon as possible. That's why a well-draining mix makes such a huge difference. A simple blend works perfectly. 2 parts regular potting soil, 1 part something that creates airspace, like perlite. Those small white pieces you see in soil mixes. They don't hold water, they create pockets of air, and that changes everything. Water flows through faster, the roots dry out properly, the risk of rot drops dramatically. If you want an even easier option, a cactus or succulent mix does the job straight out of the bag. It's designed for plants that hate sitting in moisture, and there's one thing you should never do: using soil from outside. It might seem convenient, but it's too dense. It compacts easily, holds water, and can introduce pests or diseases that your aloe doesn't need. Once you correct the soil, you remove another invisible barrier. Suddenly, your watering routine starts working the way it should. The roots stay healthy. The plant becomes more resilient. It's one of those changes you don't immediately notice, but over time, it's the difference between a plant that survives and one that truly thrives. Now let's talk about something most people overlook completely: the pot itself. You might think a pot is just a container, something that holds soil and looks nice on a shelf. But for aloe, the type of pot you use can quietly decide whether your plant thrives or slowly declines. Start with the material. That classic clay pot you've probably seen before, the simple terracotta one, isn't just popular because of how it looks. It actually works with your plant. The surface is porous, which means it allows moisture to escape through the walls. So even if you water a little more than you should, the pot helps correct that mistake by letting excess moisture evaporate. Now compare that to plastic. Plastic holds everything in. The moisture stays trapped longer, the soil dries slower, and if your watering isn't perfect, the roots stay wet far longer than they should. That's where problems begin. So if you've struggled with overwatering before, switching to a terracotta pot can instantly make your life easier. It's like giving your plant a built-in safety net. But the material is only part of the story. There's one rule you can't ignore: drainage. No drainage hole means no escape for water, and when water has nowhere to go, it settles at the bottom of the pot. The roots sit in it. They weaken, they rot, and eventually the entire plant collapses. It doesn't matter how beautiful the pot is. If it doesn't have drainage, it's working against you. There is a simple workaround, though. If you love a decorative pot without holes, you don't have to give it up. Just keep your aloe in a basic plastic nursery pot with drainage and place that inside the decorative one. When you water, you take it out, let it drain completely, and then return it. You get the look you want without sacrificing the health of your plant. Now think about size and shape. Aloe doesn't grow deep roots. It spreads outward, not downward. So a deep pot holds extra soil that your plant doesn't use, and that extra soil holds extra moisture, which brings you right back to the same problem you've been trying to avoid. A shallow, wider pot works better. It matches how the roots actually grow and keeps the soil environment more balanced. When you get the pot right, everything else becomes easier. Watering becomes more forgiving. Soil dries at the right pace. Roots stay healthy without constant attention. It's another one of those quiet upgrades that changes everything without you needing to do more work. Now here's the part most people never even consider: temperature. And the reason it gets ignored is simple. You assume your home is already fine. If you're comfortable, your plant must be comfortable too. And most of the time, that's true. Aloe thrives in normal indoor temperatures. Not too hot, not too cold. Somewhere in that steady, comfortable range you already live in every day, so you don't need special equipment or constant adjustments. But here's where things go wrong. It's not the general temperature that causes problems. It's the sudden changes, the hidden drafts, the spots in your home that feel normal to you but are stressful for your plant. Think about where your aloe sits. Is it close to a window during winter? Cold air can seep through the glass, even if you don't notice it. That slight chill, repeated over time, can shock the plant and slow its growth. Or maybe it's near an air conditioning vent. Every time the system turns on, a blast of cold air hits the plant directly. Again, something you barely notice, but your aloe definitely does. These small, repeated stresses add up. The plant becomes less stable. Growth slows. Leaves may weaken or lose their firmness. And because the changes are gradual, you might not connect the problem to the environment at all. The solution is surprisingly simple. Move your plant just a little, a few feet away from direct drafts, away from vents, away from those subtle temperature swings. You don't need a perfect spot, just a more stable one, and this is what makes it powerful. It costs nothing. No products, no tools, no complicated setup, just awareness and a small adjustment. There's also something important to understand about aloe during colder months. It naturally slows down. Growth becomes minimal. The plant enters a kind of resting phase, and if you don't know this, it's easy to panic. You might think something is wrong. You might start watering more, adjusting more, trying to fix a problem that doesn't exist. But the plant isn't struggling. It's simply resting. During this time, it needs even less from you. Less water, less interference, more patience. And once you align with that rhythm, once you stop reacting to every small change and start recognizing what's normal, your aloe becomes incredibly easy to care for. It's no longer something you worry about. It's something that quietly thrives in the background. Now we're stepping into something that completely changes how you see your plant: fertilizer. Most people assume that if they want faster growth, stronger leaves, and a healthier plant, they need to feed it regularly. That's what you hear about almost every houseplant. Monthly schedules, special formulas, constant input. But aloe doesn't follow that rule. In fact, feeding it too often can do more harm than good. Aloe comes from environments where nutrients are scarce. It's adapted to survive with very little. So when you start giving it frequent doses of fertilizer, especially at full strength, it doesn't respond the way you expect. Instead of thriving, it begins to show signs of stress. You might notice brown tips forming on the leaves, edges that look burned or dry, growth that seems uneven or weak, and it's confusing because you think you're helping the plant grow, but what's really happening is overload. The roots can't handle that level of nutrients. The plant becomes overwhelmed, and instead of supporting growth, the excess starts damaging it. So the approach here is simple. You scale everything back. Instead of feeding constantly, you fertilize just twice a year. Once in spring, once in early summer. That's it. And even then, you don't use full strength. You dilute it. Half strength is more than enough. A balanced fertilizer works fine, or something designed specifically for succulents. When you do this, you're matching what the plant actually needs. A small boost during its active growing phase, and then nothing while it rests. And here's the part most people find surprising. Even if you skip fertilizer completely, your aloe will still survive. It may grow a little slower, but it won't collapse or fail. That's how resilient it is. If you want to go one step further without relying on synthetic products, there's a natural option that works quietly in the background. Something gentle, something slow. A small amount of compost or worm castings mixed into the top layer of soil once a year. No complicated routine, no constant feeding, just a light touch. And once again, you see the same pattern. The less you interfere, the better your aloe responds. At this point, everything starts to come together. Light, watering, soil, pot, temperature, feeding. Each piece matters. But there's one final skill that turns all of this from guesswork into confidence. Learning to read your plant. Because your aloe is constantly communicating with you, you just haven't been taught how to understand it yet. Look at the leaves. If they start to look thin or slightly wrinkled, that's your plant telling you it's using up its stored water. It's not a crisis. It's just a signal, a gentle reminder that it's ready for a deep drink. On the other hand, if the leaves become soft, mushy, or start turning brown near the base, that's a warning sign. Too much water. The roots are struggling, and if you don't act, the damage can spread quickly. Then there's color. If the tips or edges turn red or brown, it often means the light is too intense. The plant is protecting itself from stress. Pull it back slightly, and over time, you'll see that color stabilize. If the entire plant looks pale or stretched, leaning toward one direction, that's the opposite problem. It's reaching for more light. It needs a brighter environment, or at least a more balanced one. Even the way the leaves grow tells a story. If they begin to flop outward or lose their upright shape, something in the environment isn't quite right. Often it comes back to light or watering, sometimes both. And here's what changes once you understand this. You stop guessing. You don't need strict schedules or rigid rules anymore. You don't react out of fear. You observe, you interpret, and then you respond only when it's necessary. That's when plant care becomes simple, not because the plant changed, but because you did. You're no longer trying to control every detail. You're paying attention to what's already happening and making small adjustments that align with it. And that's the moment your aloe goes from surviving to truly thriving. Now that you understand how to care for aloe the right way, there's one more step that can take your plant from healthy to something that genuinely stands out. This is the part most people never try, not because it's difficult, but because they don't realize how much of a difference it makes. Once a year, that's all it takes. Think about everything your aloe has been doing quietly in the background. Growing slowly, storing water, adapting to your space. It doesn't ask for much. But when you give it just a small, natural boost at the right time, the results can be surprisingly dramatic. Instead of chemical-heavy feeding or complicated routines, you use something simple. Something closer to how plants are nourished in nature. A gentle, nutrient-rich solution that feeds not just the plant, but the soil itself. When you apply it, nothing seems to happen immediately. There's no instant transformation, but over the next few weeks, you begin to notice subtle changes. The color deepens, the leaves feel thicker, growth looks more confident, more balanced. It's like the plant has more energy, more stability. And the reason this works so well is because it doesn't overwhelm the plant. It supports it quietly, the same way everything else you've learned in this process does. No extremes, no overcorrection, just a small adjustment that aligns with how aloe naturally grows. This becomes your secret advantage, because while most people are overwatering, overfeeding, and overthinking every step, you're doing the opposite. You're working with the plant instead of against it. And that difference shows. It shows in the way your aloe holds its shape, in the richness of its color, in the steady, healthy growth that doesn't look forced or stressed. It becomes the kind of plant people notice without you pointing it out. The kind that makes someone stop and ask, "How did you get it to look like that?" And the best part is, your answer is simple. You didn't do more. You did less. But you did it right. Now take a step back and look at the bigger picture. At the beginning, it felt like aloe care was confusing. Too many variables, too many chances to get it wrong. And maybe you've already experienced that frustration, watching a plant decline, even when you were trying your best. But now you see it differently. It was never about doing everything. It was about removing the things that were quietly causing harm. Too much water, too much sun, too much attention, and replacing all of that with something simpler. Better light, proper soil, a pot that works with you instead of against you, a stable environment, occasional feeding, and most importantly, the ability to read what your plant is telling you. When you bring all of this together, something changes. Your aloe stops being unpredictable. It stops feeling fragile. It becomes one of the easiest plants you own. You don't need to check it every day. You don't need to follow strict schedules. You don't need to constantly adjust and fix things. It just grows. Slowly, steadily, confidently. And over time, you start to notice something else. New growth appearing from the center. Leaves that feel stronger than before, maybe even small pups forming at the base, ready to become new plants of their own. That's when you know you've done it right. Not because you followed a perfect routine, but because you understood the plant. And once you reach that point, it doesn't just apply to aloe anymore. You start seeing other plants differently too. You stop overcorrecting. You stop assuming more effort is always better. You become more patient, more observant. And ironically, that's what makes you better at growing things. So the next time you look at your aloe, remember this. It doesn't need you to do more. It needs you to do less, but smarter. And when you do, it will reward you in the simplest way possible, by thriving right in front of you, without asking for much at all.